Hello, hello. We are live today, and I'm very excited to have a special guest with me who I will introduce in just a moment. But before I go on to introduce our guest, Richard Etienne, I'd like to read my usual disclaimer because whenever we talk about introversion, there's someone that says, well, it's on the continuum, or well, I'm an introvert and I don't behave that way. So, just to clear it for everybody, please remember that introversion varies widely among individuals. The experiences and approaches we discuss are not one size fits all, but may offer valuable perspectives for many. So, that done, phew, let me jump into today's content. So this session was supposed to happen last week, but there was some sort of problem between LinkedIn and StreamYard. So this is why we're back again. But fantastic that Richard was able to rearrange his schedule and join us. So what are we doing is towards the end of the session asking you for questions. But if you do have any comments, if you do have anything you want to drop in, feel free to drop it into the comments in LinkedIn. We will be reading those, but we just won't acknowledge them during the session until towards the end. So with that said, let me jump into introducing Richard. So every time I talked about doing some sort of series for introverts, somebody would pop up and say, oh, you must get Richard Etienne on. So I'm really excited and delighted that he's here today. And let me just first of all read you a little bit of his bio. So Richard was the formal official videographer to British Prime Minister Theresa May. Richard holds a senior communications positions within the private and charitable sectors and has driven the online promotion of global brands in academia, arts and politics for 20 years. He's currently director of internal communications at Elsevier, and he's also a personal branding consultant, and he's really focused on giving added voice to quiet leaders. Richard has also, for 6 years, hosted a masterclass for introvert professionals with The Guardian, and he now does the same thing with the Evening Standard. And I'm sure he'll mention this to us because he's got something coming up quite soon. And he's also the founder of the Introvert Space, which hosts Black Introvert Week each October. And before Richard, having read your very esteemed biography, before we jump into it, I also want to just add that the reason why I invited different guests on was because of a survey I did with my audience. And the reason that communication is a topic is because people were saying things like, I struggle to be heard in conversations in a room full of extroverts. Many continue talking, they don't breathe for air to give me a good place to interject. So that having been said, I'm going to say hi to Richard and then we'll jump into the interview. So Richard, hello.
Hi, Shola. Thanks for the invitation. Thanks to everyone that's watching this as well. Appreciate it.
Wonderful. Thank you for being here. And since we've got you here and you're a font of information, let's just jump into the first question. So Richard, you have held some prominent positions, and that includes being the official videographer of a prime minister. Now, as we all know, people that are in politics, often they are quite extroverted. They might be people who, very much are of a strong opinion. And so how, as an introvert, did you manage to negotiate that space with those sorts of individuals? And just tell us some of the strategies that you used and how that was for you, please.
Sure. So that's really good context. And as an introvert who did serve in quite a high office, was the highest office in the land, right? I found that navigating this high-profile role required a very delicate balance of self-awareness and like energy control management. I think is a good one. I still do it now, for example, where I book lunch as a meeting because now I work in a hybrid way, so that I have that time for myself to recharge. But while I was, this is pre-COVID, obviously. So while I was in the office, I created similar kind of recharge pockets, so to speak, throughout the day, and that was just to give myself just brief moments of solitude where I could just step away, gather my thoughts, and just kind of replenish my energy. So, for example, yes, I worked I worked for the Prime Minister, but I didn't have my office in 10 Downing Street. They offered me one, but I was like, nope. So I have my office in this really small place in the Cabinet Office, which you can access through the back way of Downing Street. That's public knowledge, it's not a secret. So yeah, 70 Whitehall was actually where my office was, and I would only go into Downing Street through the back door. I hardly ever went through the front. I didn't want to get papped, or I just didn't want that attention as well. So yeah, that's how I did that, and then also I learned the importance of preparation. So before, I was gonna say a high stake event, I mean they all were, right? So I'd always take time to mentally rehearse what I was going to say, for example, to the PM or any other world leaders I had to engage with. Prior to working at Downing Street, I did work at Buckingham Palace. I met the various members of the royal family. So all of that, I had to really prepare, and that would help with things like small talk. As a lot of introverts will know, small talk is not that great at small talk or networking usually. So yeah, preparation was very helpful.
Interesting. And so you said that you had to prepare, and I'm sure that a lot of these people are sort of quite narcissistic individuals. Yeah, not the majority, but there are bound to be a few in something like politics, or people who've got very, very strong opinions. How was that in conversation with those individuals? Let's say that you had an idea that you wanted to put forward, and maybe they had a different idea, or they were kind of very vocal about their own plans and things. So how did you not necessarily even go toe to toe, but what kind of strategies did you have? Was there anything in addition to preparation and energy management? Because obviously sometimes things come up in the moment and you need to address those spontaneously. So anything that came up there, or any kind of anecdotes or any tips and advice?
Yeah, I could give you a tip. So I always kept the acronym TED in mind when challenged with certain viewpoints, etc. And that stands for tell me more. Or could you explain that? Or describe that for me. Describe how you got to that point. So I pick any one of those three TED moments because first of all, it just gets rid of any sort of hearsay chat. They picked up something from a third party and actually don't have significant evidence to back up their claim. So yeah, that acronym helped me in many situations, and also favorably as well. In networking, you may be in a position where you actually don't know what to say to keep the conversation going, but you are genuinely interested. So again, tell me more, explain that for me, describe, TED. I think I still use it to this day.
Thank you. Thanks for that. And I know that you do some work now empowering quiet leaders. So what are key tips that you would give to introverts who want to enhance their visibility and impact? Because obviously you've been in some very high profile roles, or even if you were more behind the scenes, you were interacting with very high profile people. So you've seen a lot of people in action. Maybe some of them were introverts and they still managed to get to the top in these areas. So yeah, what advice would you have for people given what you've seen?
So at the top of this conversation, you mentioned that I have an evening standard masterclass coming, and I do on the 16th of July. Now, if you were to go to the website that's promoting or advertising the event, I have a video, kind of like a promo video, and I actually can't remember the number. I think it's like 8 tips, but definitely one of them is about leveraging your strengths. So I always try to help those who identify as introverts, to be very aware of their strengths. We excel in, careful analysis, deep thinking, these one-to-one interactions. And it's about helping them to understand how to use those skills to their advantage. So, for example, in the roles I do, I encourage a lot of senior leaders to write thoughtful leadership pieces, thought leadership pieces, and also letting them know that they do excel in perhaps smaller group settings to offer insightful solutions to complex problems, because there is so much that they have to carry in that position. The attention will always be on them, whether they try to hide in a corner or not. I always often tell people, you have a personal brand, whether you think you do or you don't. Just simply Google yourself, and that way you'll be able to find out how the world perceives you, and also, what information is out there about you. So there's that, and also, I think the final one is about practicing strategic visibility. What do I mean by that? So you don't have to be the loudest voice in the meeting, right? For me, meetings start way before the start time and they end beyond the finish time. So I may reach out to the chair beforehand after seeing the agenda to say, do you know what, I'd like to raise a point on this particular agenda point. And it is so empowering to be invited to give a point rather than having to put your hand up or whatever to be selected. So that's something that I often encourage. Prepare your thoughts in advance. Look for opportune moments to contribute meaningfully. Don't just use words for the sake of them.
Thank you. Yeah, I remember reading an article. I forget the woman's name now, but she's an introvert and she used to struggle with speaking up in meetings and cutting through. And so she met with her manager beforehand, and the manager said, right, well, in each meeting, we'll just create a meaningful moment for you where you can actually share something that has been prepared. You don't need to feel under pressure. And through that, she said she really excelled, and she's now the CEO of a big company with about more than 1,000 employees. So those sorts of strategies really can work. So thanks so much for mentioning that. That's really important. And I'd love to know a little bit more about how these sessions that you're running for the Evening Standard and the ones for the Guardian, how did they get started, and how have they evolved over the years to support introverts?
So I was I was an introverted person growing up, and if anything, because we're on a scale, right? No one's like purely introvert or extrovert. And when I was in late teens, early 20s, I used to struggle with large groups, maintaining relationships beyond the institution itself. For example, even like a classic example is being asked to go out to play as a child, and I couldn't do it. Like I needed my me time, my moment, and I had that in my early career as well. Wouldn't go to the pubs on Fridays, and I'd swerve a few invites to things, not because I didn't like them. Again, energy. And I was like, what's going on? What's wrong with me? And it was only much, much, much later I read that book, Quiet, from Susan Cain, and then realized, oh, wait, I'm part of this group called Introverts. And so I was like, okay, now I know where I belong. Let's go out there and look for some helpful strategies to implement in the workplace. I couldn't find any for love nor money, especially anything UK kind of focused. So I did notice at the Guardian, I do remember even that the Guardian held masterclasses for various topics, because I had attended some in the past, such as creative writing, for example. And I reached out to the founder, the manager of it, and asked her, hey, would you be up for something around introversion or personality diversity? And she said, yeah. So I went away, spent about 6 months doing lots of research and putting together the course. And yeah, they trialed me, about 20 people. That got sold out instantly. 50 people, 70, 100. Like, it just got sold out immediately. So they realized, okay, we're onto something here. So yeah, that's why that relationship lasted such a long time. And the team actually has moved from the Guardian to the Standard. It's not like I got kicked out or whatever. Like, the Guardian shut that down, and so they've moved it on. So yeah, I'm still with the same founder. She's amazing, and it's a really great working relationship.
I love that. And how interesting that, because that book, Quiet, I think I was already aware of being an introvert, but the book Quiet by Susan Cain really kind of crystallized things, I think, for so many people. And the fact that the book was so successful as well, I think it really helped so many of us to realize that, you know, there's nothing wrong here. We can still be really successful. And she kind of laid things out very clearly for us and for others to read as well, which was amazing. And I want to go back to this subject of energy management, because, and also the way that people sometimes there's a question, so we'll come back to that in a bit, but talk about energy management and also the way that people interpret introverts' behavior at times. Because when we spoke last week, you were saying that a lot of people in your past have said, oh, Richard, you're so laid back, and especially as a black man, you know, that kind of, oh, you're so laid back, you know, soon come type thing, can be can work against you. And for me, people will often say, oh, you're so calm, and you know, while I take being calm as a compliment, sometimes it's like, well, maybe you should be more excited about this, or why aren't you fired up? So I just like to, you know, maybe just talk about that for a moment, and the way that these interpretations or misinterpretations or perceptions can color the interactions that we have with other people, and maybe affect the way that we are regarded. Because, you know, I think it's something you've seen quite a lot, right?
Yeah, for sure. A lot of people may be familiar or not with the term code switching, and that essentially is where one needs to interact differently in different spaces. You know, very often we hear in diversity and inclusion spaces to bring your whole self to work. However, when you really think about it, can we actually do that? How many of us actually do that? And I know that if I did that, life would be very different, I think, for me. And, you know, this whole notion of being perceived as laid back in a negative term, yeah, in my opinion, comes from that misrepresentation or misconception that, you know, black men are, you know, more, whatever that is, you know, just a bit more dramatic or loud. I don't know what the terms are, but that's basically what we see on films, TV, music, etc. And because someone who has another man, a white man who has a similar, you know, kind of personality style, to me, does not get called laid back at all. You know, they get called, you know, considered, strategic minded, and, you know, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's not great. And what I have to do is, yeah, code switch. I have to kind of change the way I behave in certain spaces so that people feel that I'm on top of things, or I don't know, man. It's not great. It's not great.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because I know that you run Black Introvert Week, and I think the way that intersectionality can show up for introverts, you know, is obviously what we were just talking about, those examples, but being interpreted as aloof or standoffish. In particular, again, you know, I did an article, I contributed to an article for a Black magazine a couple of weeks ago, and the journalist was saying that as an introvert, she's been called, you know, standoffish, aloof, you know, up herself, all those sorts of things, just because she's a quiet person that doesn't always want to socialize. And, you know, I could think by the same token, you know, maybe somebody who has a, you know, heavier frame, for example, and there's the stereotype there that if you're a bigger build, you know, you're the life and soul of the party, you're, you know, barrel of laughs. So if you're an introvert with a larger body size, again, you know, there's probably some misperceptions about you as well. So maybe you can share a little bit about Black Introvert Week and how that came about, and how you celebrate that every year.
Yeah, so actually, it came via one of my Guardian masterclasses. So Jerry Bingham, who actually founded the US Black Introvert Week for February's Black History Month, was an attendee of the class, and she reached out to me afterwards, and yeah, shared her concept of Black Introvert Week, and how like that was her first year that as well, that she had launched it, and the feedback, and I was like, wow, okay, not sure it will fly over here, but let's see what happens. So I had the first year of essentially what is like like a perception, like, hey, there's this thing, folks, tell me what you think about it. And yeah, I mean, it got picked up by the BBC, Cosmopolitan Mag, and just so many people, so many outlets, and ultimately it was to it's threefold, right? Like it's to empower organizations to understand how to create a more inclusive environment for Black introverts, because we can often feel like the minority within the minority. And then it was, giving Black introverts a voice, a platform, a community. And then finally, the third is to celebrate, celebrate the achievements of Black introverts across the country, and just help to just reframe that perception, just of introverts more generally. That's where the introvert space comes from. It's about that. It's so many world leaders are introverts. So many entrepreneurs, multi-billionaires, etc. They're introverts. It's to be a leader, to be a CEO. You don't need to be loud and I'm not saying extroverts are loud, but like that perception of what being an extroverted leader, or just a leader generally is someone who is highly sociable and just out there, and that's not true. People, Elon Musk is an introvert, for goodness sake, even though he's out here just doing some wacky stuff on X and other places. So yeah, so that's how Black Introvert Week UK came about, and we are in our 4th year now already. Yeah.
Fantastic, amazing. And when is that again? Can you tell me, and I'll make sure I put a shout out when it happens.
So it's always the last month of October, which this year looks at calendar 21 to 25, 21st to 25th of October 2024.
Wonderful. Great. Well, thank you for highlighting the importance about the significance. I'm sure it's just going to keep growing and growing and growing, because there are more and more of us, and very happy to proudly declare that we are introverts. And in terms of making that declaration to colleagues, etc., one of the things in this article that I'd contributed to was, one of the things I said was, if you let your colleagues know that you're an introvert, then at least they will not be misinterpreting your behavior. And it's interesting, because in this quest for energy management, there's all sorts of things that we might do, like turn down going to the pub, or decline an invitation to do something. And only this week I was involved in it didn't end particularly well. It's still kind of open-ended, let's say, but there was somewhere I was supposed to travel to, and I think not all the communication was made up front. And then I sort of pulled out of doing the travel, because I just wanted to conserve my energy for other things. And I think it was construed as me not being fully committed to the project, and not really being a team player. And it's hurtful when things like that happen. But at the same time, I guess I want to take some responsibility, because perhaps I should have made it clear that it was because I needed to conserve energy, or I was aware of this. And then maybe other people, it's about giving the benefit of the doubt. So, when you're working with people, or yourself, perhaps your colleagues in the role that you're in at Elsevier, and in the charitable sector, I mean, how I guess you're pretty out there as an introvert, but how much do you as much as we can be out there, right? But how much do you do to educate your colleagues as to, I'm an introvert, this means that X, Y, and Z, or P, Q, and R? So yeah, talk about that, please.
No, definitely. So anywhere I work, because I used to be a freelancer, so I was in and out of different organizations all the time. But I would always try to introduce personality quizzes. The most recent one I've used is 16personalities.com. So that's numerical 16. I like it because it compares you with like famous people at the end. So it's kind of fun as well as informative. And, I use that at the start of working relationships. I asked my line manager, hey, could we use this as a basis to talk about performance or development opportunities as well. I shared my insights profile, this year's insights profile. My line manager, she read it from cover to cover. I love her for that, and she thanked me for it as well. So that's one way for sure that I personally try to encourage colleagues to understand my personality type and how that would affect communication. So, like the role I'm in, director of global internal comms, I am always behind the scenes. Essentially, I'm telling other people's story. Communications is a supportive function of a business. So, for me, it's like the perfect introvert role. Like, being a videographer for anyone, I'm behind the camera. Like all of these roles is about me telling other people's stories because I genuinely love it. Everyone has a story to tell, and a lot of people don't often realize that they have one as well. So I really enjoy drawing that out and helping individuals just feel an elevated sense of self. So yeah, so just to recap, yeah, so personality quizzes is something that I bring in, but also I select roles where I'm not the focus, basically. So yeah, it's great because I get to meet new people every single week and tell their stories.
Wonderful. And I'm sure they really appreciate that as well. And I know that in my role, I work as a speaker, so I am the focus a lot of the time, but it's very much, and I want the audience to know this, that I'm the focus so that they can be the focus. So whether that's through giving them interactive exercises that they can do with each other or themselves, or opportunities to share their views in the chat, or to, come on and share. It's about other people and about service, I think, a lot of the time for introverts. And if we're making the effort to push ourselves so that people are seeing us, it's because we're so passionate about what we're doing and about elevating other people's voices or whatever it might be, that we're prepared to have that discomfort in order to do some good work. So I don't know if you feel the same sort of thing. It sounds like you do, Richard.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah. So the next question is really about technology and remote work, and obviously being able to work from home or remotely is great for many introverts, and I'm sure that there are, in terms of this proximity bias and making sure that we're seen and heard, there are impacts there as well. But what are your thoughts about the advancements in technology and the impact on introverts in the workplace?
I'm very happy with the advancement of technology, especially now we're moving into large language models within comms, so generative AI, and using that as like a co-pilot to the work that we do rather than a replacement. Like that, yeah, I'm all for that. In terms of how hybrid work or online work has affected introverts, the ones that I've spoken with, plus also my own experience, it's first of all minimize opportunities for networking, informal kind of small talk, coffee, chit chat, etc. Because now one needs to set said meeting up. It's not I've bumped into you on the way to a meeting or in the elevator. So as introverts or anyone that finds it challenging to create networking opportunities, yeah, that's a challenge. However, on the flip side, happy side now, meetings. Before, you'd sit on that, let's say, long oval table and you're probably in the corner somewhere, if there is such a thing, and you're reluctant to raise your hand, or you may raise your hand and you're not being picked up or whatnot. But now online, everyone's face is on screen. You can raise your digital hand. You can speak in the chat. Hi, Nikki. Hi, Olivia. And have a voice. Even though it may not be acknowledged at that point, it's still present. So yeah, those are two kind of standout bits for me, for sure. Lack of opportunities for networking, and then the added voice in meetings.
Yeah, I remember during lockdown, I was talking about opportunities for introverts in a LinkedIn post, and somebody chimed in the post and said, yeah, I'm an introvert. And I would typically, we have these big meetings at work, and there are often 60, 70, 80 people in the meeting. I would never, ever, ever, ever dream of putting my hand up and, tentatively suggesting something. But with the chat there, I just popped something in the chat and they adopted my idea, and I'm over the moon. So I really do feel that with those opportunities that we have to speak out without kind of putting ourselves too much at risk, we really do need to take advantage of those. So yeah, very, very important point there. Wonderful. So I've put into the banner here, the ticker, that if there are any questions, please feel free to drop them into the comments. Unfortunately, the comments don't work particularly well in terms of conveying all the things people have dropped into the chat. So I'm trying to get onto the live via LinkedIn, but it's not letting me. So so I guess what you could do, if you do have a question, maybe you could drop it into, you could DM me with it, or you could even perhaps email me. Oh, it's a bit complicated, but just try with the chat maybe, and just try a couple of times. Maybe they'll get through. But there was one question that came earlier, which was about your course at the Standard, and the question from Nikki is, how do you structure the framework for the course?
So I love that question, Nikki, because I recently got a feedback from a session that it was well structured. So I'm like, okay, cool, this is great. How did I come up with it? I went back to my filmmaking brain. So most films are in 3 acts, and so I split my courses into 3 acts. The first act is about understandings, that framework, context, foundation, so that everyone is on the same page. Like, okay, so now we're on the same page, we can move forward. So first is foundation. Second is action. So second is like equipment. All right, so I've laid the foundation of my house. Act 1. Act 2, I've got equipment. So these are tips, tools, wonderful kind of dialogue, instructions, etc. So, for example, there's like 7 words or phrases to remove from your professional vocabulary. And then the third act is putting into action. All right, so you've laid the foundation, you've got your tools, now you build the house. And so that's how I've structured it. And then in that final act, it comes to a nice kind of close, like a landing, where I talk about well-being and, just helpful daily habits and rituals, like saying no more often, but like different ways to say no. And a lot of introverts we like to use the word sorry a lot. So it's a helpful way to leave people with some final words of guidance and wisdom before the close. So yeah, I hope that helped, Nikki.
Thank you. And so yeah, I know we're not trying to get you to divulge all your top secrets that you'll be sharing at the session. However, just to tease us. So you said 7 words to remove from your vocabulary. So maybe if you could give us 1 or 2 of those words, that would be helpful.
Hey, there you go. All right. So I guess I don't use sorry, but I do use the word just. Just is a word that a lot of us put on the front of emails, sentences to request something, just checking in to see if you've got blah. Just wanting to know if you had some time next week to discuss something. And unfortunately, that word feels a little bit like an apology. It's like making it a bit soft and less forceful, even though it's not forceful at all to ask for something that you need in life. And so I would always say remove those from the starts of sentences. Verbally, that doesn't really matter, and I don't think we even use it that often verbally. But for some bizarre reason, on the emails, messages, instant messages, like we put just at the beginning. So that's one of them. Another one. I'm no expert, but a lot of people actually start with that. And you are an expert in something. And there are two ways, two approaches I always provide. First is to bring it back to where you are an expert in. And so, for example, you may ask me a question about, I don't know, astrophysics or physics or something. And I know I'm no expert in astrophysics, right? But I'm not going to say that. What I'm going to say is what I am an expert in. Well, I'm an expert. Like within communications, we always have a simple foundation, which is what do we want people to think, feel, or do. So, within this particular experiment, have you considered any of those particular elements? Whatever. However, that's element one. Like I might be able to talk about where I'm an expert, especially if I've been invited to a meeting, right? Like, so you have a right to be there like everyone else. You were invited because of your expertise. But the second part is if you don't have anything to say, you may know someone who is an expert in said question or topic. So offer to introduce them to said expert. And now you're still valuable, right? Like you're a connector of people. It's wonderful.
Thanks for that. It's interesting, isn't it? Just sorry, I'm no expert. Because I guess a couple of points here. So one is from the perspective of women, where if women come across as being too forceful, sometimes, or too assertive, or too kind of poised and knowledgeable, let's say, it can work. And can we be too poised and knowledgeable? Hopefully not, but it can work against us from both men and women. So that's one point. And I'm not saying that we should resolve this now, Richard, because this is like a huge thing. So it's just to bring it up. And then with the just and I'm no expert and sorry, I know personally, I can be sometimes quite conflict avoidant. I don't really want to get into it sometimes with people. So I might just say, well, I'm no expert, but blah. I don't use that term, but I'm just being a bit devil's advocate-ish at the moment. But I'm no expert, or I don't know a lot about this, but I'm thinking ... And so it's just like a cover to share your view without putting your neck on the block, sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, it's just some things that kind of came to mind. But it's interesting, isn't it? All these little the just softening terms that we can use, and I guess a part of it's about what kind of impression we want to give. And I guess when you're working with people as a coach, you're helping people to kind of increase their profile, to come across as stronger and more assertive, or owning their space. So obviously all these sorts of things maybe would take a back seat in those interactions.
Indeed. And my whole thing is always asking people questions. Like, you may not have the answer, you may not be an expert, but there are certain questions which are very principled. Now, on my, obviously you can't see it, but there's a whiteboard I have here with my to-do list. But on that whiteboard, I wrote a list of questions that I took from an FBI website. These are questions that FBI agents ask every single time when they're faced with a conundrum. And it's things like, what if you did nothing? What have you already tried? What were the lessons from that? Will this be widely welcomed or resisted? What's currently working well that we can use? I mean, I'm not going to read them all. It's about 30 there. But that's something that's publicly available. And it makes you appear as an expert in, problem solving. And ultimately, that is what life is about. From the very basic thing of, my oven stopped working, how do I get it fixed? To, that's not basic at all, but do you know what I mean? Like from something in your home to something in your office, it's all about how do we solve said problem.
Asking the right questions, often more important than having the answers, isn't it? So we've had a couple of questions come in, which is amazing. So the first one is, let's see, so it's quite long. Let me just see if I can pass it. Yeah, so Bernadette, this is from Bernadette, and she says, Black Introvert Week sounds really interesting. She's moved from an IT role with a lot of introverts into a secondment in the people area, which is very different. looking to progress, which I find difficult. I receive feedback regularly that I should network more with the wider team. Any tips when you don't know anyone in a large group and not feeling like an expert in the field? So yeah, maybe feeling a bit set adrift and not needing some orientation.
Well, I mean, thank you, Bernadette, for the question. It's always about trying to find common ground. And the one common ground everyone has in the room is that they're in the room. So the question is, why are you here? Whether it's about who invited you, what do you want to gain from it? Is there somebody you're trying to connect with? Because once you start with that common ground, you can then ask the right questions, as we were saying before. So one thing that I learned from Buckingham Palace is that when the late Queen, used to speak with individuals, she wouldn't ask them how, she would ask what. So for example, every Monday we go to work, and then the first question people ask you is, how was your weekend? And it's very easy to just be like, wow, yeah, it was all right. And that's it, conversation's finished. It's really awkward when you're on a Teams call and you're early and it's just you and one other person. So what the Queen used to do was ask, she would probably ask, I'm not going to do her accent, what was the highlight of your weekend? Oh, now I've got something to say. And I can say, I watched the Euro game. Oh, what team are you rooting for? Oh, whatever. Turkey. What's your connection with Turkey? Like, what is a great question starter rather than how? Hope that helps.
Thank you. Thanks for that. And another, just in terms of these questions, because I often hear, or used to hear, that why is too intrusive a question. And yet when I was reading, I was doing some prep for these introvert interviews, and I was reading a particular book about introversion, and the woman who wrote it was saying, ask people why, because you'll really delve deeper into their motivation, etc., etc. So as someone who's avoided why for probably years, like, why did you do that? Because I guess people can take it in a kind of defensive way, right? Well, why are you questioning me? What are your thoughts on why versus what, let's say?
I've never actually given this thought. However,
you're on the spot, sorry.
That's fine. As a comms person, my opinion would be based on reading the room. How well do I know said individual? The great thing about introverts, I feel like our emotional intelligence is it's up there. It's up there. We're really good at those one-to-ones. And I just think that, yeah, there's a way to work out. You could ask, what was the decision behind, what led to the decision behind your deciding not to use why in questions? Because then it encourages the person to give the story in a way that is possibly less intrusive. But actually, I don't know. They both, in my mind, I'm thinking as I'm going. It just they sound very similar, and I think it's all down to just reading the room. There you go. That's what I was saying.
Yeah, I think why and what can be similar, can't they? I think it depends, and I think some people might be a bit defensive with a why, but I think anybody who really wants to explain themselves and is kind of open and interested in a deeper level discussion will be quite happy to talk about why, because I think it's more revelatory about your motivation, what led to the decision, etc. So yeah, thanks for that one. Let's see. So there was a comment from Nikki, who works who's a veterinary analyst, and she said that she found the conversation really helpful, and she's advocating for introverts in her industry. So that's brilliant. I don't know if there are any more questions. So I know, Richard, you've got to get back to work, I think, or you've got something on this afternoon, I believe.
Indeed.
A busy man. So interestingly, when I was talking to Emma Louise, she was mentioning that introverts often don't like to just shoot the breeze. We like to be purposeful with our communication. So I won't just engage you here with chit chat. But if there are no more questions, then I just want to wrap up by asking you, Richard, if there's anything you would like to promote or any links you'd like to share. And then also I've put onto the screen here, if you do want the link to the recordings from today and last week, and also a PDF download, which is just going to put together the key highlights from each interview, then make sure that you go to sholakaye.com/introverts, sign up for that, and we'll make sure that we email you the links and the recordings next week. But Richard, back to you. Anything you'd like to promote or how people can get in touch with you? Go for it, please.
Certainly. So my next event is on the 16th of July. It's at 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. British summertime. It is with the Standard. And I was in the paper last week, Monday. Was it last week? Yeah, last week, Monday. That was cool. So that's it. Yeah, I won't flood anything else. My website is richardetienne.co.uk. Everything about what I'm doing and have done is there. So yeah, check me out. Thank you for joining as well.
Thank you. And can I ask you a last question? Is that okay? He's like, what? I thought I was done, damn it. So I'm interested because I've been self-employed for a number of years now, but I see more and more individuals who have often very high-profile jobs who also are working quite hard on their own personal brand. They have their own website. They have, their side hustles or whatever you want to call it. And so I'm just curious, especially as somebody who's in communication, have you ever found any sort of struggles with that? And also, even as an introvert, when it comes to putting yourself out there, have you ever had colleagues that say, well, why you've got a job, why have you got your own website, blah, blah, so just curious from a personal perspective on that one.
I've not had anyone outwardly question my work outside of my 9 to 5. I think primarily because it's something that people from the feedback actually value. So it goes the other way around. It's like, oh, Richard, I just read your blog on introverts in meetings. Would you mind sharing some of that at work in the office? So it usually goes that way around, which I'm like, okay, fine. Because I always have these things before I join a company. So like when I'm having my interview, I say, hey, I also did this other thing. Is that okay? So you always get that done. But also I'm not particularly sociable. I live at home alone. So in the evenings I have time. And that's when I spend just an hour an evening. It's not much. Just keeping things updated, connecting with certain people. It doesn't, because I love doing it, it doesn't feel like work. So, and it also doesn't take up much of my time. Yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you for that. We squeezed out one last drop of goodness before the end of the session. So many polls. I really enjoyed this. Fantastic conversation. So thank you again, Richard, for joining us. And thank you to everybody that spent this last 50 minutes or so with us as well. Much appreciated. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Shola. Appreciate it.